Okay, we're getting ready to develop a strong relationship and coming up with some opportunities to discuss what's really important about education reform, especially in the state of New Jersey. We're here now with State Senator Ron Rice. You know, you're one of the leading tenured individuals that, and I guess obviously when we really want to talk about tenure when it comes to public service is based upon the fact that you have been overwhelmingly reelected by the people, for the people, and it isn't anything that someone has appointed you to. In perspective to how we are challenging the efforts of policy in relationship to education and the way that the employees are given an opportunity to continue to keep their jobs without being threatened based upon political relationships. Some of the things that have been relevant in the discussion have really resulted to a number of people who resent the policies that have been really enforced, and in many instances it appears as if there's a civil war going on. Right. Your definition of where you stand as a politician in regard to the fact that the government does fund education, the funding mechanism is more of interest in the investment for the relationship that we deal with education. Mm-hmm. But we know that the real problem is that our kids are not learning. How do we really challenge the effort to make the decisions so that we can see some real change?
Well, first of all, I think we have to get some things straight. You hear all this talk about reformation of the education system, when the reality is the abolition of public education as we have known the traditional school system to be, which is a constitutional system for a quality education, and every youngster have an opportunity to have a quality education. And so when you talk about reformation, we shouldn't be discussing abolition. That's what some of the discussion is when it comes to privatization of the public school system as we know it. Reformations takes place within the system itself, within the school system, and certainly across this country, our youngsters, particularly in the urban communities, aren't doing as well academically as they should be doing. A little different than it was when we came up, when teachers were committed to teaching, and most of them still are, when there were people who were committed to putting themselves into the education by being involved. Parents, for example, not making excuses. You know, my mother worked in a sweatshop and still came home and found some time to cook, clean up, and get down to a PTA meeting once in a while, or at least check on us when we got a phone call. We know times have changed today, given the violence in our community, so people don't feel as liberated, as you will, to walk up and down the street on their own by some assistance. And so when you look at this whole education system, as we look at it from Trenton, the debate is really about making change. Mm-hmm. And when you talk to superintendents and principals and administrators within our systems and teachers, they want change. Some of the change start before the paperwork they're bogged down with because of state legislation, which no one is really talking about, how to consolidate that. Accountability you have to have. And so when you look at systems coming into a traditional system with no real accountability, such as charters, et cetera, and it don't mean that charters are a bad thing. What it means is that we have to make sure that we're playing by all the same rules. Okay. And then I think that's what's important. I don't hear teachers or administrators or unions or elected officials, at least I don't hear it, saying they're anti-charter schools based on what the traditional notion of charter schools was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to be an experimental type of a program, for lack of a better word, where you could actually go out and take this institution and we'll allow you to do some things on your own volition that's different than what we're doing traditionally. Mm-hmm. And if in fact it proves of more of a value to the learning process, then we were supposed to take what you found out to be and put into every school, okay? What happened was people are confused with charters and vouchers. And the reason I said it because there are some charter schools that's being organized by voucher people. Mm-hmm. Because when the voucher movement started back in the 1950s, right after Brown versus the Board of Education, mm-hmm. where the far right wing, Christian wing of the Republican Party, and some of the, to be honest about it, wealthy Klan members did not want integration of schools. The idea formed by Milton Friedman and Rose Freeman, John Warden from the Walmart Foundation, and others, was to say, well, okay, we can't stop the integration of the schools, So why don't we take the taxpayers' dollars that's going to the states and then privatize the education system, and then it's called a business. And if it's privatized, it means that the owner determine who comes and who goes. What happened was that movement started throughout the whole country, and they were targeted states such as New Jersey, South Carolina, Georgia, California, etc. There was a coming together maybe 20, 25 years ago where Milton Friedman and others said we made a lot of progress trying to get vouchers and privatization going since the 1950s, but not enough progress in that many years. And we're facing debates and legal challenges in the Supreme Court, and we've had some successes, and we have some setbacks fighting unions and everyday people. So we have to change our strategy.
Right.
They indicated that we're too white and too wealthy, and that was their strategy. They said it. They said, so we have to find everyday grassroots people. And what we have to do is not talk about vouchers, use the buzzwords, and one buzzword is choice, because choice is a very sexy word, and people always want choice. So maybe we can hide behind that, but we also have to find everyday people, whether it's Ron Rice or, someone else, or Cory Book, to go into the communities, buy into our program, and sell it.
Right.
And we'll put the resources behind them. So what you have today is just an extension and a regroup and reorganizing of philosophy, not philosophy, but how you accomplish the mission. You couldn't go over the mountain,
Right.
couldn't go around, so you went over it, Hannibal. Then the charter school movement started in Milwaukee. What happened was it was an African-American woman, from my understanding, who started that. And eventually she left that movement because the voucher people came in, and I would suspect they fed her a bunch of crock, and she thought she had some help, and it became a charter school movement, but really a voucher school movement. So when you see charter schools lining up across the country now, what you see are the multi-billionaire young people from Harvard, same school Cory Book and others went to, that's their relationships, and hedge fund people. And so even with this debate in New Jersey, when I did not sign off on the acting commissioner of education, it was for good reason, very substantive reasons. Because to me, the issue is not about Cory Book at this point, because I know who he is, where he comes from, why he's here. Right. And I don't begrudge that, I just don't agree with him, okay? It's not about SURF. It's about the hedge fund people. So the whole reality is that rather than paying attention to SURF or Cory Booker, we need to be paying attention to the relationships they have with the hedge fund people. Now, having said that, if in fact you start to look at the hedge fund people, some who are funding this city, and some who probably will be funding, because there's a huge network from the boards that they have, then you will see that some of those hedge fund people are the same people that helped the market collapse on Wall Street, but some of them have been under SEC investigations. Some have had relationships within their businesses that actually did federal time for inside trading. And so what you have here is this national movement that's really international, because Mr. Cerf, for example, was the CEO of Sangaris. Sangari is a multi-billion-dollar business that's operating out of Brazil and international community as well as here in the United States. And then there are spin-off LLCs, in other words, spin-off small businesses from that. The hedge fund people also have their own superintendent university and management university, because Eli Broad and some of the others out there feel that they need to train people the way they want to take over school systems. And they actually tell you in their documents that not only do they put entrepreneurship together, entrepreneur personnel together, they actually target urban cities. And so I don't know how deep, I know this is very deep, but I'm only one person looking into it. I'm a former investigator, so I have to do it on my time. And that's the reason that I refuse to sign off on SURF. And I really believe that our governor should recognize that and recognize some of the potential improprieties of what's taking place. It may even be money laundering out there. I don't know. That's just my opinion. Some kind of way it's going through the system, and it's getting back to the hedge fund people and back to Wall Street. The final thing on that note is that when it comes to a district like Newark, we have almost $1 billion education budget here. The hedge fund people, what they do is, if you don't want to go into business, they identify persons that support them, and they put them into cities like Newark, education system as superintendents and managers and people of that magnitude that they train. Then the entrepreneurship side is that they will tell you that we can help you reduce your budgets and help property taxpayers. But what we're going to do is we're going to have an after-school program, but it's no longer going to be run by people within the system. We're going to go out and get, say, Ron Rice Company, for example, who's the hedge fund people that they have trained in the other side of the business.
Right.
And so you got this big loop of entrepreneurship taking place, and that's how they're taking privatization now. And they're spending big money on slick advertisements and magazines and TVs and promulgating this thing. The E3 relationship, the Manhattan Institute, the BAEO, where Cory Booker is a board member and a founder, where the money is being funded. You also have the Democrats for Better Education or something like that. I forget the exact name. I have it here, where you have Eli Broad and all these people involved and Cory Booker on the board and stuff. So you can understand this relationship.
Right.
And that's why I say it's not really about Cory the person,
Right.
as we know him, or Surf. It's about follow the money. This is serious, serious stuff.
Okay. We're here with State Senator Ron Rice, and Senator Rice, and we do have a little
Ron,
personal
yes.
thing. But honestly, the kind of way in which you have really dialogued, it does give a chronological history of many of the nuances that obviously happened between an area of change that had occurred, even in the way that we deal with, civil rights, to say the least. And the nuances from that really transcended into a number of different anomalies, such as the fact that African Americans are now the minority of a minority.
Right,
And that, we're no longer the majority minority.
Exactly.
And since those things are subsequent to how many of the priorities are relegated, there are a number of different deficiencies in terms of saying that because people are of a particular color or of a particular dynasty of a descent, that they are disenfranchised primarily based upon the fact that they did not take advantage of a number of different opportunities that should have been there that really weren't.
Exactly.
So we can really understand exactly where you really put into perspective about the sexy word, for instance, choice itself. Semantics has always played, a major part of defining exactly where we wanted to grow and in what direction we wanted to do it in.
But let me say this. When you have a governor who goes around the country and is projected with national media, meaning news, TV, et cetera, saying that I'm going to go into the urban cities in my state and I'm going to fix education for those young people who are not scoring as well as they should be scoring, but never set a foot in the traditional public schools. You only come to Newark and go to charter schools. He finally went to one of our new Oliver Street, where we're going to build a new school, and that was for a PR thing. But never talk to the superintendent of the school system, who was a new superintendent, didn't have enough time, to see his programs come to fruition, that was doing good things. That troubles me, because what you have is you have a non-minority, and I'm not trying to make a racial statement racist, but you have a non-minority who does not live in our city, who is wealthy, who's always going to be wealthy, telling us how to fix our system rather than asking us what help we need to get it fixed. Then you have people of color, and we won't call names, buying into it on personal reasons because they are benefiting from all the money that's out there. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with you benefiting and selling us out in the process. And that's where this debate is. If you go and look at the Newark public school system, whether it's the Global Village, whether it's the new things we did with PSE&G to get solar on top, to create a training program for these kids, there are things ticely happening here that never get media awareness. If you look at some of the non-AMPA districts, I'm telling you there's some mismanagement in this state, There are also some failing students. And so we should be inside these traditional school systems, whether it's Camden, Patterson, Jersey City, Asbury Park, wherever the problems are, saying, no, we're going to change things here. We're not privatizing, but we're coming in and we're going to regroup.
So what you're really saying is that the arrogant relation of how the approach has been provided really doesn't give any kind of consistency of trust
Well, that's what it is, and 90% of the student population in this country as well as this state are always going to traditional public schools. I'll give you a good example. The charter schools are part of the Newark public school systems and a few other urban education systems. But if you look at it, the media the governor and the serfs and the bookers keep saying that charter schools are outperforming traditional public schools, including Newark. That is not factual, and that's why serf and the governor won't give all the proper information. They will use one school like the Robert Treat and say that this school is high performance, where it is. But so was Harry Tubman, First Avenue, Abington. We can always, in a system, pick out people who are doing better than others, schools that are doing better than others. But across the board, the charter schools in this country, including New York, okay, that's always in the media with Corey, they are performing below the traditional public schools in most cases and on par in others. So the issue is, well, Governor, why would you come in and start freely giving out in such a liberal way new applications for more charter schools?
As a Republican.
Exactly,
yeah.
okay, as a charter schools, when we can agree that the charter schools we have are not performing, not passing the exam. They don't have the test we have, but passing, okay? Why don't we use the resources to bring those charter schools up to par where they should be,
okay,
as well as traditional schools? And the attitude is like, we just want more charter schools. Well, you want more charter schools because that's what the hedge fund people told you when they start funding everybody, what you have to buy into.
Now,
I'll give you another good example.
Let me get to this example, because one of the things, classically enough, that has not been part of the dialogue has been that many of those charter schools that are getting underfunded as a charter school are traditionally African American or minority charter schools, and in relationship of that, how is it? Hang
on a moment for your next question.
Okay.
But that's based because the majority of the charter schools up to the recent years has been placed in the urban communities.
But the urban community schools are the ones that are not getting the lion's share of the dollars.
That's my point.
Okay.
But my point is that it just happened to be, my suspicion would be if in fact they were in other areas, okay, and they were white folk, they still probably wouldn't get it because there was a quirk in the law that was brought out to my attention by a couple of charter schools 3 or 4 years ago, because they should be up to like about 90, I forgot what the number was, but they were down like 80 and 70, okay? But we initially fixed that. We subsequently fixed that. And so they should be at a certain income level and of receipts. So I don't deny that. But when you look at this movement, when Governor Cuomo, he's doing some of the same things, but a little bit differently, okay, that we're doing here. But I can document, at least I can document what was documented, put it that way, okay? That when Governor Cuomo was a candidate, now he's a Democrat,
Right.
when he was a candidate, he went looking for the hedge fund people. And they were kind of leery about that, but they sent a delegation to meet with him. And subsequently to the meeting, they decided to support him. He went and told them up front, I'm running for governor, I need some money. And that's why they're a little leery, because they usually identify their own horse to ride, okay? And subsequent to the meeting, it must have been a good meeting as it relates to them coming to agreements. So all of a sudden, he bought into it, and he's talking the same type of stuff in New York that they're talking here, even though when Surf was there and Joe Klein. Now, I find it very interesting. I read a Star Ledger article a couple of days ago, and Joe Klein is really building up the character, if you will, of acting Commissioner Surf. But because Joe Klein knows in New Jersey that people in New Jersey don't know who he is. But he's the guy in New York who brought Surf in. Okay. And Surf is the guy that was the Deputy Commissioner of Education in New York, okay, under Klein, that started to move more charter schools, try to privatize things, took away benefits from teachers and people of that magnitude. But he's also the person, when he first got interviewed, owned several businesses, okay, between coming from St. Gary and Edison Learning and others. And the spinoff of that was Newton Learning, things that people in New Jersey don't know, the government don't talk about. But when the parents interviewed him, they raised the fact that he had a business. And they raised the fact that he had it, and they were concerned about that relationship with privatization of schools, the type of business he had. And he said he has severed himself from the business. They said, fine, when did you sever yourself? He would not tell the parents at the meeting. What he did was say, well, I'll send you a copy of my document. But the New York Times interviewed him and said, hold it, tell us, because we have the information. He said, well, I severed my relationship with the business the day before I met with the parents.
Okay.
And that business went public, was going public, I think it did go public, on the stock market. Hedge fund people again, you follow what I'm saying? Then he gets to New Jersey, and all of a sudden he has another business now called Global. See, they keep changing business. That's why I said this is dangerous. It's an integrity thing here. They go to Global, and the question becomes, well, I'm not with Global. I only use my address.
Okay.
But then when people start to check, he said, well, I used my address. I did have a relationship, but it was short-lived when I found I was going to be acting commissioner. Okay, in the meanwhile, this program his company put in that's going to close and take all of our schools, okay? And so I'm saying, hold it. You go to the parent group in New York when you was with Edison, and you wouldn't give them all the truth, okay? So the New York Times had to depict it, okay? You come here, you don't give all the truth with your businesses. The question is, if you were the CEO of Sangari, which is an international education company that sell programs and privatize businesses, how many other relationships you have out there from business? Because if you have a business in Brazil where Sangari is, then I wouldn't know that unless I do some Brazilian searches. If you have one, you see what I'm saying? Because they keep spinning off. And so to me, the government need to recognize this is a bad choice. Like Michelle Reed was a bad choice. These are all the same network people vouchers. The greatest concern I have now is that the public in Newark, and the state as well, but Newark in particular, are not given an opportunity to be involved with the selection of a new superintendent when we had a good superintendent, okay? Because I'm concerned because the governor's been pushing that you don't have to have an education background, you can have a management background. Now keep in mind, they push the same thing in New York. But if you go back to the documents of the hedge fund people, they have their own superintendent and management school. So my concern is, okay, since this is so close to the belt, they probably know who it is already, just going through a process to kind of distort the real picture. And are we getting someone else who's been trained by the hedge fund people in our superintendent school about how to privatize and take over and build capacity with entrepreneurship? Or are we going to get a manager from that school, et cetera? And so the public, unfortunately, don't have the time, I can't say they can't get information that's available to them. When you speak to the state government, whether it's the governor's people or someone else, they don't want to hear it. They want to keep getting in the media saying, this is a very wonderful person. No, we're doing things for the sake of the kids. Well, you know what? You're not doing things for the sake of the kids. Let's be honest about that. It sounds like apple pie and motherhood, but you're doing things for the sake of multi-billion-dollar Wall Street people who went to Harvard and Stanford and Yale and Rice University, and it's documented, who's had problems in investigation from SEC, and it's documented. And the final thing is that everybody's talking about money. We don't have one dime, okay? Everything you read in the paper, see, people keep asking me, well, how much money we have? I said, we don't have any money. What you have is commitments from hedge fund people that if you allow us to come in and take over your system so we can feed more money to our boys in the entrepreneurship side, then we'll give you the money. So right now you have a piece of paper commitment. Now your job, Corey, is to go in there. And when you read the newspaper, because I don't go to these meetings with them anymore, when Corey stood up and gave the State of the State, Corey got a little frustrated from what I understand, and I read the paper, and he said that we're going to do this thing, meaning take all these schools, okay, and do what they have to do, and I'll use this as a bully pulpit. And he was insistent and very adamant that I put my career on this. So you would assume that he was talking to the audience with his message. That message was for the hedge fund people, because they're getting a little leery now with all the money they're pumping to the city behind Corey and pumping to Corey nationally and giving them all this media about whether they're going to be successful in this state, because they have failed in other states. They won in some states and they failed. So the message to the hedge fund people is like, I'm going to get this done. Okay, I don't care. Bullet pulpit, I'll make it happen. You know, and that's what I read in that message.
Okay. So since in that regard, your stand is to say, no, we're not going to let you do this, or that what it is isn't really genuinely trying to effectively change the paradigm of failure when it comes to the students in our schools?
Exactly. Just what you said. I could use those same words. It's not genuine. If you really cared about these kids, if you cared about the kids in the city of Newark, Corey, or Governor, then you tell me why every time there's a homicide or a shooting, we never see your name in any articles. But the same day we can see your name in the paper talking about Oprah or this guy with the $100 million or how you're going to close our schools. So these are young people dying. These are the various kids that you're talking about in the school system. Where's the compassion for that and for those families, okay? And that's why I said the whole thing is distorted. I get pushed back as the bad guy, but I don't have a problem with that because I come from a history of segregation in the South. You know, I came to Newark in 1955. Brown versus Board that overruled Plessy v. Ferguson, which said you're going to integrate these schools. I was in Virginia then. You know, I know what it's like, you know, and so I take it personally. I take it personally when black folk and Latinos and innocent people visiting the city get killed every day, and we're playing games for a bunch of charter school people who aren't really charter school people. There are a handful of real charter school people out there, and we love them, we support them. But they're playing games for hedge fund people. So wealthy people don't care what happened to us, and it's all disguised, and it irritates me very, very substantially, okay? And it's sad that other black elected officials aren't making noise about this. It's sad that Latinos elected officials aren't taking the time and look at the picture because we're the ones being harmed the most. Interesting enough, they started to talk about putting charter schools in quote unquote the white communities, and the first thing the people did was said no. Okay? You're not going to have it down here in the Lakewoods, those areas down there, okay? Because they could see through some of this stuff. They could also see what it was doing to their traditional public schools. But we sell it up here under the auspices that we're helping kids. The governor sell it out in the town hall meetings in the wealthy communities that by doing this, we're going to reduce your property taxes. Like we don't pay taxes here in Newark, okay? We're going to reduce yours, so that's one message. You understand where it's coming from? Yeah. It's two messages. We're going to reduce your property taxes, but we're going to help your kids. Mm-hmm. So either way, they got us gangbanging. That's what I call it, for lack of a better word. And you're right, civil unrest is getting ready to take place in Newark, and it shouldn't happen. They should not pit parents against parents. They should come honest and let people know what's going on.
Let me get you something to talk about off topic, and I don't want to exhaust you, but I do have you, and while we still have a little extra time, it's going to work out. When we look at the situation in regard to the redistricting and how the debate now has become a dialogue of Democrats and Republicans, is it adequate to justify the fact that politics is really not the answer here?
Well, the reality, it is politics. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, and I've said it, that the commission itself that's making the decision, more so on the Republican side, and I hate to say that because I'm a Democrat, there are too many conflicts there.
But isn't it as business as usual? When I say politics, I mean politics is like really saying that we need to do something to justify the respect of the people.
The reason it's business as usual because I've been spending the last month or two trying to draw a map that's fair and just as it relates to the redistricting rules, but also the 1965 Voting Rights Act, as well as the 1982 amendment to that Voting Rights Act that said that you cannot deny minorities opportunity to be candidates from a community of interest, okay? And believe it or not, I've got the map pretty much drawn. I think there are 3 or 4 districts where the numbers don't work under the deviation we have, because initially the deviation was 5%. The population for each district is supposed to be 220,000. So what the 5% deviation mean is that if you couldn't get to 220,000 given the way the state is structured, you could go 5% above that number, which puts you at 230,000, but no more. Or you could put it at 210, but no more. Well, a couple of weeks ago, they came back and said, well, you're going to still use 5%. So we drew a map on 5%, and the numbers worked because what it meant was that Republicans and Democratic districts, except for 14, didn't need any tweaking. When it went to 2.5, almost everybody in the state had to increase the population or decrease the numbers more. So we had to go back and redraw. But the map I have thus far does not impact on demising African American leadership in the districts they are presently in, or Latino leadership in the district they're in, nor Democrats, Caucasian, Latino, African Americans, nor Republicans, okay? Now, there are 2 districts or 3 districts where I've got to figure out how do I get the numbers within the 2.5. But putting that aside, so what that tells me is that this fiasco that's taking place, that I'm reading in the media about how they're going to take and push Grace Spencer into Nutley through Belleville, and this one all over here,
into
right, et cetera.
one district.
That's offensive to me because it's not really necessary. So getting back to the question you raised, the reality is that, and that's why I say there's too many conflict and interests there, because the district's not supposed to be drawing on who you like or dislike. What's happening is that there are certain people that they want to protect. And they don't care what happened to me or you or someone else, but there are certain people they want to protect. And that's not the reality of a map when you move it, okay? And so because of that, there was a statement today where, you know, they said that they're drawing the map, the Democrats are drawing a map to pit Democrat Vitale against Democrat Majority Leader Bruno. And they went off the roof with that. I don't blame them. Then the speaker, who's part of the process down there, is saying, well, that shouldn't happen. But my question is, if you're inside, those Democrats that's inside, why would you even have, you should sell front. You can print what you want. It ain't going to happen. You see what I'm saying? And that's not what we are getting. And so now you've got Democrats fighting Democrats. Republicans the same way. They're having the same type of, not as heavy, okay? But they have a similar situation, you know, as it was depicted in the news media today, in their house, you know, and that's why I said that it's going to be what it's going to be. And people like myself, this is my 3rd redistricting process, and I remember when they violated the principles and the statutes. Because to be quite frank about it, you're talking about putting Cody, who's a Democrat, the former governor, into Morris County. Well, the redistricting rules said you draw a line. So therefore, if the district stops here and you have to pick up number, you just move the line to the next district, okay? In other communities, such as Sussex County, Warren County, Gloucester County, places like that, Cumberland County, you have a lot of open space. You have a lot of small towns within the middle. Like one town has 882 people. Well, you have to move the line to take the whole city. Here you only have to do that a little bit, not much. And so as a result of that, how do Cody get to Morris County? Primarily because Republican O'Toole, who's a real nice guy, nice senator, okay, he lives in Cedar Grove and Verona and Essex County. He represents 12 towns in his district, which is over 200,000 people. But in Essex County, where he lives, he only represents 26,000 people. And so the community of interest is really right there in the 27th district. And so if, in fact, the 27th district have to pick up people, and they do, if they pick up Cedar Grove and Verona, they meet their numbers. They don't have to go to Morris County. So it's obvious someone is trying to protect that particular person rather than have a community of interest. And that's where the problem is. Now, once you do that, it means that all the other districts get impacted on because you're taking numbers from them, whether it's Republican districts up in the 24th, which is up that way, whether it's the 40th district rolling around into the 39th, which is Cardinelli.
So we're saying that most of the individuals that are there to protect the integrity are basically doing whatever they can to manipulate their own control.
Exactly, and some of that's being influenced by outside, tightly as it's kept, by the outside party bosses, okay, who want what they want because in some of the counties, you have political bosses who actually control the candidates and actually control people in the legislature. Now, they don't like to hear me say that, but it's real. You know, and they know I call them out on it, okay? Because people always wanted to control me and I always tell them where they can go jump. And that's why I always have political problems, on the line, off the line, you know, but God has blessed me and my constituency base, which is the unions as well as corporate America and everyday people who vote, they stood with me. That's the only reason I'm still here.
And you're a solid stand-up guy, and you keep your word. Really
try to do
appreciate
that.
you.
Okay,
all right.
guy. Thank
So we're
you.
going to just
Appreciate it, okay.
take a little few minutes, and hopefully we'll build up a little bit more
Okay.
participation, get
Take
some of
your
the
time.
other
Sure.
people, and
righty.
we'll be able to work it out. Thanks again.
Okay.
All right. And then I have more. Boy, you could do
that's gonna
something,
be
man.
my
All right, listen, we're here now with Dr. Walter Farrell, who's out of the University of North Carolina, and, it's really impressive that I have someone of your caliber here who's been really doing some wonderful work in terms of keeping the message clear. Because, look, I've often said that if there was no debate, we certainly wouldn't get in the areas of relationship that we have in terms of saying that we can be successful. And there's always got to be an opinion that's reflective, and certainly you know where I stand in regard to being able to dialogue those kinds of relationships that are necessary, that we need to be at the table on both ends of the spectrum. But in relationship to many of the things that you have been able to focus on in regard to the education process and knowing exactly that there is a civil war going on, what has really transpired in regard to trying to find a way in which we can create harmony opposed to constant conflict?
Well, there is no attempt to create harmony. This is an attempt to shift money from the public sector to the private sector and to create a new profit center. We know from all of the available research that charter schools as a group do not perform better than public schools, and that voucher schools perform woefully worse than public schools. I just returned from Milwaukee this week, where a study was published yesterday that showed that voucher students performed about 20 percentage points less in reading and math than public school students. And Milwaukee has had the longest running voucher program in the nation. It's in its 21st year. And so we know that they don't work. And this is, in a sense, an effort to rearrange the deck chairs on a Titanic. No one wants to put the level of funding, along with accountability, into public education to poor children of color. As we approach 2011-2012 school year, more than 60% of all public school students in this country will be of color. They will be either African American, Latino, Hispanic, Asian American, or Native American. And there is a declining commitment I've found in traveling in all of the states that are pushing these privatization initiatives, that there is a decline in will to fund quality, adequate, thorough, and efficient education for children of color. There's just no commitment to that. In my home state of North Carolina, the Wake County Public Schools, which has a national reputation for being effective in educating poor children of all racial and ethnic backgrounds, the Republican majority took over the school board in the 2009 election. They just took over both houses of the North Carolina legislature, the first time in 150 years. And the first thing they wanted to do out of the box was to lift the cap on charter schools and bring in vouchers. And this school system is successful. And the same people who are pushing that initiative in North Carolina are the same people who funded that study that is resulting in the reorganization of the Newark school. Eli Broad, who gave Cory Booker $500,000 to do this study that Chris Surf, the acting commissioner, did serendipitously, now also funded the election of the school board and placed one of the graduates of his superintendent's academy in the Wake County Public School, a former Army general who's had 19 months of experience in public education.
So when we look at the concept of what has happened for the past 30 years, we fought very hard, tooth and nail, for whole school reform. We found that it wasn't really working in the public school model. Now there are conditions that saying, after 30 years and a number of different ways in which alternatives have been able to transition the dialogue, that maybe it may not be a good policy to say that the only direction that we're going to have a success in education is through a public policy funded process. Why is it that the encouragement to continue to keep it under a political control necessary to say that the only reason why it's not working is because we're not putting enough money in it?
Now, money is only part of it. See, what we are doing, we are trying to hold schools accountable for the collapse of communities. In the city of Newark, we have more than 59% of African-American males not in the labor force. Schools can't cure that problem. You've had the outsourcing of jobs, movement of manufacturing jobs that would support Newark families as they used to developing countries. Mandating vouchers, charter schools, holding teachers accountable for the academic outcomes of students will not solve that problem. You cannot solve social problems in the schools. Dentists cannot remove an appendix because they're not trained to do that. Teachers are not trained to be social engineers in the way they can't create jobs for parents. They can't stop home foreclosures, which disrupts families and destabilizes the family environments of students. They have no control over that, but we want to hold them accountable for that. And so until we look at the fact that the reason public education came into fruition in the first place is because the private sector couldn't be trusted to effectively educate children except their own. And so we're returning to that. And what has resulted over the 20 years of charter schools and now the 20 years of vouchers is that we've shifted billions of dollars into private hands. A number of people have made a lot of money off public school students, and they haven't improved education one iota. And that's just the fact.
Wow.
These are not my data. These are data as studies roll out, and every time a study rolls out showing the inconsistency, people have an explanation. You hear of the KIPP charter schools, the most successful in the country. They have a 46% dropout rate of African American males. Study just published today. And when studies come out like that, the opposing side, who's pro-KIPP, pro-charter, pro-voucher, pro-privatization, say, well, they're looking at the data wrong. It doesn't work. You cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And that's what they're trying to do here. And parents, urban parents in particular, are rightfully frustrated. They want something better, and they're promised something better. But the better has not been delivered.
All right, we're going to be looking forward to a major discussion here today. Thank you. All right. Jeff Schindler, would you like to come up for me to do about it? Okay, good, good. How about you, man? Listen, Jeff, really, it's really good to see you here today and to really take on a tremendous responsibility of debating over a concern that has been replicated as a challenge of wealth versus individuals who really need to have an opportunity to get out of disparity. Looking at it from the concept that in many instances, the real problem has been in understanding what is the genuine conduct behind the energy that's put into a choice interest. Why is it so important that choice should be a part of the debate?
Well, I can take myself for example. I grew up in a public school. By third grade, I was falling behind in reading and spelling. If I would have stayed in the system that would not have met my needs, I would have been aggravated. And, you know, aggravated students tend to be disciplinary problems. Right. Now, fortunately for me, my parents had options. Leave me in the public school system that wasn't serving my needs, or transfer me to a small private school that could give me the individual attention that I needed. I spent 3 years there. I got back up to speed. Then I was transferred back to the public school. And then I graduated from the public high school, and I went on to a public university. But we had options. My brother, who also lives in New Jersey, he had a daughter. The daughter was going to a public school. It wasn't meeting her needs. So what he did is he moved 400 yards down the block so that he was over the line into another public school district and sent his kid there. She went on to graduate and received a good education in college. The opportunity to get the education that a child needs to be successful in life It's key. I don't care how talented you are when you are born. If that talent is not developed, you're doomed to failure. Now, choice. What does choice do? Choice gives every parent the same options that my parents had, that my niece had. If the school in your district is serving your needs, stay there. It's good. However, if the school is not meeting the needs, then the parents should have the right to send the child to a school that is meeting the needs. Now, as a taxpayer, we have allocated the funds, so it's not a question of money. Every child in this state has the opportunity to go to a school that is qualified to meet the child's needs. The only difference between those who don't go to a good school and those who do go to a good school is the fact that parents don't have choice.
All right, we're definitely getting ready to move into the session as soon as we get everything together. I want you to just relax a few minutes and get you really stirred up.